I was born in Sacramento, California, and I spent most of my life there, and eventually went to college in Southern California. Graduated from college in 1976, which I noticed in a Wall Street Journal about 10 years ago was a really bad economic year, which is how I remember it. So I couldn't find a job. So I was in the streets of downtown Oakland in the summer of '76, walking from the gas company that didn't want me to the phone company that didn't want me. And I happened to see a recruiter sign in the street before a building. And I remembered that, and I decided to check it out because I absolutely needed employment. And I had a beautiful history degree. I was very good at doing my homework. I loved school, I loved research, but I had not much work experience. So I went into the recruiting station, and the Air Force said, "Thank you, but no thank you. You have a history degree, no technical background." The Army said, "Oh my goodness, come on down. We'll give you a commission because of your grades, because of your GPA. You will not have to earn it. Isn't that wonderful?" And I said, "No, thank you." And that left the Army, the Marine Corps, and the Navy. So I visited with both of the recruiters to think about, which way forward. And my dad was a very civilian man, but he had a great, warrior heart approach to life. So the Marine Corps looked good to me. It looked normal and appropriate to me. That kind of ethos made sense to me. And I was dating someone at the time who was in the Marine Corps, and that was the closest I'd ever seen a Marine. And so I looked at him, and I looked at some of the sailors that were there near Oakland. Very fine people, but I decided to go with the Marine Corps, and that's how I ended up going in active duty. I was unemployed.
Okay. Did you have any other family members that were in the service?
My dad was in the Army in World War II. Okay. He was kind of a loner rebel type and did not enjoy it. But he did enjoy the concept of mission, but that was it. Not another soul that I can... Oh, I guess I had a great uncle that was briefly an officer in World War II, though I didn't realize that really as a child. So nobody around my family as a child was promoting the military to me.
And you entered in as an officer.
I did.
Where did you go to Officer Candidate School? Officer
Candidate School is exclusively in Quantico, okay. So I went out to Quantico. Now this was just after the academies, or at least some of them, had integrated the previous summer. So they had moved the women's officer, I was in the very last women's officer candidate class. They had gone to, they relocated physically near the men, to the parade deck that the men used and the barracks area the men used. So we were in this hybrid kind of touching near the men training, but we were completely separated for Officer Candidate School. And then of course at the end of that I got my commission. And then unexpectedly the Corps was under pressure to combine the men and women officers for training in the basic school. It's a 5-month general course, it was at that time anyways, for all officers to do before they go off to their MOS class or their field assignment. And so they decided fairly abruptly in about a 2-week period to combine us in the basic school. Okay. There had been an event that had generated some negative PR for the Corps, and they thought they could use this combined class and make it a heavy PR, heavily press attended and documented experience would be a positive way to redirect the attention of the public. Okay. So that's what we did.
So you're halfway through Officer Candidate School when this happened?
No, it was actually so abrupt. I was on Christmas leave. I had graduated, got my commission, okay. Gone home. There was this faint rumor we would be combined, and when I got back on January 3rd, I was in a joint officer basic school class, 3-77, okay. Which was the first time men and women had trained together. Okay. We kept ourselves as women. There were 22 of us in a little platoon amongst, I want to say 5 platoons, 4 of which were entirely male. But when we went into the field, we were broken down and scattered across male platoons so that we were integrated with our fellow male lieutenants for all the field exercises.
Gotcha. What was that like? It's different for everyone.
It was different for everyone. I was very blessed. My company commander, my captain, company commander, my staff company commander was a wonderful man who was just most willing to do whatever the Marine Corps asked. And of course that attitude does permeate. And so my fellow lieutenants, some of them were shocked I was there, but nobody might have been thrilled I was there, but they didn't particularly mind it. And I was treated well. And I made some good friends. So I had a good time. Some of my girlfriends didn't do so well. There was some hostilities there, which inevitably you'd expect. But I had a pretty good time with my my platoon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what did you do in the Marine Corps?
I was an administrator,
Okay.
0180. So I was adjutant and personnel officer.
Okay. And what does that entail?
Well, I was always in the fleet forces, that's the operational forces, and that you run all your paperwork for the staff at the battalion level. You run battalion level administration, you're working pay, you're working perhaps supervising the legal side and the court martials. You're providing all the command support for change of commands and ceremonies. You provide the postal service. All the administration that you'd think that would go with a battalion.
Regardless of what you do in the Marine Corps, though, every Marine goes through, at least officers, go through the same training.
They do.
What was that like?
Every Marine is a rifleman, and the Marine Corps takes that quite seriously. So really and truly, you're out there with your weapon, doing and learning. You're doing land nav, night land nav, all your tactical exercises, small unit movements, and then you're going into larger events. And we were the first women to qualify with both weapons, which was a .45 and a M16 like. Mine was actually an AR-15. So we did rifle and pistol qualification for the first time as women. With our men counterparts, we were completely integrated for that, and just got up on the firing line and did what we were told with our own weapons.
How long is that portion of the school?
That was about a week
Okay.
of actually being on the range every day and working with the range coaches. So it was quite the event. There was a lot of, the range coaches, of course, were all men. They were troops, NCOs, probably corporals and sergeants. They were very eager to teach the women under their care to fire well. There was a lot of support and encouragement. I was a nice little California suburban girl. I had not seen a weapon prior to joining the Corps, much less known a human who had fired a weapon.
Right.
Hunting, nothing, zero. So there I was, but it's very technical and it's not really very complicated. You just got to do what they say and do a little body control. But those range coaches were pretty excited if they could get a woman to qualify expert. And I'm so excited to recall that I did expert in both weapons, right, including the .45, which was a thrill to me because, oh my goodness, when I was employed as a civilian in DoD in 2010, and I fired this weapon in the spring of 1977. My boss, who'd been in the Army, came to my cubicle, and in some context I don't recall, he said, "Women can't fire the .45." And it was thrilling all those years later to say, yes, I can, and I was an expert several times. So that was fun. The Marine Corps is very, very mission oriented, and it really does overcome, in all good Marines, any personal biases or prejudices. And so if I could be good at the mission, they wanted me on the team. I was welcome, and I had a great time. I really did.
What were some of your challenges you had to overcome while you were here at Quantico?
Some people hated us, of course, and wished we were not there. Some people, I remember a Naval Academy grad saying, I don't even know why I'm here. So why the heck are you here? I mean, I understood. Our leadership from the basic school, the major and captains that were in charge of us did not expect to be the experimental company, didn't really plan on that. So there was a general feeling of unease. The Corps said it would be, so they did what they were told. But it was, everybody was uncomfortable most of the time. But we had some really good men that were our peers that could help us along. I remember one of my company grade instructors, the captain, using an obscene term that I didn't even recognize. I was so naive. And my male lieutenant was so horrified for me. But when he was horrified for me, I realized it had been obscene because it had gone right past me. I was just a really nice homework doing suburban California girl. So it was just a general sense of an unease. If they could have skipped it, they would have skipped it because they just didn't enjoy it. And the training plan had been modified. They'd taken a whole training package out, which made it shorter from 6 months to 5, which gave the opportunity to integrate us and practice with us. And so everybody was just very uncomfortable. But most people were either committed to the mission or just generally good sports on top of that. So it really went pretty well. I had, funnier things probably when I got to the fleet, which is the operational forces, at least what we called it in my day, in the Marine Corps, when I was more integrated, when the troops had never seen. Now, when I rolled out there to my first duty station, women Marines had been allowed in those types of units for 1 year. So most of the troops had never seen a female officer in their lives. And so I was kind of a shock and understandably, troops being troops, it was a worthy challenge to see if I would hold them accountable for saluting me. Right. So it was generally it's just what troops do. They will do all they can do until they get their pushback. And we need that side of their saltiness in some missions. Right. But so every time I walked across the parade deck or the grinder to go to another workspace, I would line up right on that Marine coming my way so that we could just get the whole saluting thing out of the way. He had to, render a salute, I had to respond, and then he had to drop his salute. And I never let him down ever because that was part of the game. I mean, they would have done it if I was a second lieutenant anyways. That's their job. Right. But I was a female second lieutenant, which they actually literally had never seen. Yeah. So we did that for about a year. Now my unit had a lot of night, these were some tough days. 1976 was not a happy time. A lot of, post-war, a lot of exhausted people, equipment, buildings, a lot of their social discontent had showed up in the Corps. So it was a tough place to be. A lot of troops that got in trouble. And so we had significant amounts of patrolling at night. And so I would do my duty at night, like everybody else did. And we would stay up all night. It was not a sleeping post. And you'd go and check on everybody to make sure that the unit was okay. Well, one morning I had worried for like 10 months, how am I going to break up a fight if I come across two Marines in a brawl? And one morning I'm in. Officers aren't supposed to see. So for me, yes, rarely. I'm in the chow hall early one morning, and I'm just watching the chow line, and I've stepped to the back, and I'm looking at the troops, and one of the female Marines who was on the chow line ran to me and said, "Ma'am, they're having a fight in the back room." So I run into the back room, and two Marines are engaged in complete, down and out fist fight, rolling on the ground, the whole bit. But when you get a fight, Marines gather, and all you have to do is roll in and say, "Break them up." And, 2 or 3 guys will step out of the crowd and pull them apart. So I thought, oh, okay, this isn't that hard. Right. I can do this. So they're still incredibly angry at each other, and they're standing pretty close to each other, and we've got pretty close to 20 people watching. And I'm right close to them, and we're trying to wind everything down, and I think we have wound it down. And then one of them pulls his arm back to, swing again. And I was so angry at him, which was perfect. I was so angry, I was beyond fear. I just leaped bodily between the two of them. By the grace of God, that kid pulled back on that punch, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches from my jaw, because I would have been flung across the room. He was about 6'3". I mean, I would have flown 20 feet. And so, but he caught himself and he didn't hit me. And of course, that quelled the fight permanently. But I found out many months later, because I never realized, that that helped establish my credibility with the troops, because I had leaped between the two of them, which was basically because I was totally angry and forgot to manage myself. But it took care of all my troubles with the troops ever after, and nobody ever even thought to mess with me again. Plus, then you make first lieutenant, and the troops literally, the day those bars turn from gold to silver, they just back off. I mean, understandably. And so I felt I had a very good battalion commander, very old school, probably not at all comfortable with the idea of a woman, but he was a by-the-book man, and that was what we were doing. So I was extremely well treated by my battalion commander, and I was extremely facilitated for success by officers on the staff, and I had eventually a good reputation with the troops, and I did like them. I love them, actually. They're hilarious. They're funny. They're mission-oriented. They're, fearless and gutsy, and they have energy coming out their ears. And if you lead them well, if you give them, the thing I love about the Corps is we really believe in empowering the person, and then you better take off with that duty and not over supervising. And so, if you empower them, give them some training and some guidance, they just go for it, which is a personality or a temperament style that I adore. So I had the best time. I did. In fact, one funny thing that happened, I was an XO of a company, and I had a little doorway that said executive officer on it, on a nameplate. The doorway faced outboard. It was it was California, so the barrack doors were outside. And one day, a troop drew a great big heart on it. I mean, scraped into the paint down to the door, and drew an arrow to my name. And I kind of had to laugh, because there were so many other ways of putting things that would have been not so nice, but I thought that was reasonably favorable. Right. And one day I was talking to a troop, a corporal, fun kid, and I am in my car saying goodbye to him, and I'm backing away. So I'm looking this way as I back out, and he leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, which of course he made sure he had a bunch of troops watching him do it. And, it was inappropriate, but it was actually very honoring in the manner in which it was conducted. And I got a good laugh out of that too, because they could take both sides of me, which is one of the super fun things about being a female in the Corps. You can be as hardline as any man, and you can chew out better as usual. Because of our verbal skills, we're pretty good. But then again, if you can tell that a little bit of heart might help a moment that you can privately share, you can be incredibly helpful to people who really need help, who really need that kind of encouragement. So I really enjoyed that combo package. It was wonderful. I had wonderful troops and wonderful experiences. I really did.
What prior to, you said that something about when you got there, they were integrated for only about a year.
Women had not been allowed in those operational units. Right. They were only at bases and stations for all the rest of the Marine Corps time. So this would be 1975 right. before a woman got in a deployable unit. Right,
and I think, if I remember correctly, women became what they call real Marines after World War II. Before that, they were reservists.
There was so many levels of it. Right. There was the reservist piece. By the time I got there, I was able to pursue a regular commission, but I was actually in a different. When I got there, it was a different commissioning law. So we had 2 law pipelines and 2 promotion pipelines, and so they actually discharged me from the old female law commissioning process, and then I had to be reaccessed into the regular Marine Corps and compete with the men. We didn't, until I was, maybe I was the first lieutenant, we did not compete with men for promotion. We had our own, which made us too fast because there were so few of us. And it was a huge matter of contention. But by the time I showed up, we were just switching over. And I was actually, I have like 5 DD-214s. And part of that is because they had to de-establish that law and switch me over to the ones where I fully competed with the men.
Okay.
But yes.
So it all started back in 1975, and it's pretty much the same now.
You know, and I'm not fully in touch, but they further lifted the limits of the women. They can do combat, which they couldn't do when I was in. We couldn't deploy on a ship because that was not legal when I went in. You know, you could go overseas. I served in Okinawa for 3 years at the 3rd Marine Division, but I didn't go to sea. So there's lots of pieces that have grown, and then there's a lot of functional integration that has happened very dramatically after the Iraq and Afghanistan. You know, they used women Marines to create these female groupings that could do searches and interviews of women that worked with the women very directly, that were very much, you know, at risk. In the Marine Corps too, at least if you have a roughly traditional frontline experience, see, women Marines were long integrated into maintenance teams, supply teams, resupply teams. So as they went forward from rear echelon to forward to deliver supplies and or to provide maintenance, women were always way out there from the time of the Persian Gulf crisis event, which was the first big do after the Cold War ceased. So women were always very engaged and armed like we were. I'm in 1977, April, I had my rifle, my AR-15, and I was taught to fire with that. So women were taught and trained to fire and to have that weapon and to be expected to provide their own security. When Marines go out on a convoy, you know, you provide your own security. There's not an additional security element on top of a bunch of techies who only know how to fix an engine. That's not the Marine Corps ethos. It's very much every Marine is a rifleman. And they do mean it.
What years did you serve?
I was on active duty from 1976 to 1988. And then I went into the reserves after I had baby number 2. And I finished up in the reserves in 1997.
Okay. And you deployed, where did you deploy anywhere in support of combat? Or
no, I was truly a Cold War warrior because the Berlin Wall didn't fall till 89.
Okay.
So, but I did go to Okinawa and I did serve 3 years overseas, though assigned to a unit that was permanently stationed there, the 3rd Marine Division. So in my day, we were not experiencing combat. There was a skirmish on a tiny place called Maguez, but that was about it for my years were very Cold War.
Yeah. What year did you get out again?
88.
As a reservist?
97. I retired in 97.
So tell me what's changed between the time you got your commission and the time you retired, from your perspective.
Well, obviously, everybody got more used to women being there. The Marine Corps was pretty integrated from the moment it made the choice. We didn't have a lot of experiences, but then they happened, and the Persian Gulf crisis happened. I was recalled to active duty for that, but I was assigned to a unit at a base that processed other people on to the war zone. So I came back from home for 5 months to process. The Marine Corps in it nobody had used reservists, recalled reservists, for a long time, because when they did it in Korea, they did not give them sufficient refresher training, and there were some devastating losses. And obviously, if you lose a reserve unit, you wipe out a town. And all the moms and the dads and the school teachers knew them all. So everybody was hesitant to recall reservists, and they never did until 1990. And then they did, and they've initially recalled, individual ready reservists, which are people who finished that first tour and went off to go to college and kind of forgot they were in the Corps, but technically they owe you, 4 more years. And so they all came to me And typical Marine, from which I'm very proud, when they sent out the orders to ask all these disparate IRR Marines to report, well, Marines are pretty loyal, and they reported at a very high rate, like 92%. So one day I have 0 people in our camp, and the next day I have 2,000 because they hit the San Diego airport. And they get on a bus, and like Marines do, you've got a whole bus, 42 or 50 passengers, and the oldest man looks around and stands up and says, I'm probably the oldest one here. I'm Lieutenant Colonel so-and-so. I'll put myself in charge of y'all. And the 2 or 3 captains stand up and say, sir, I'm a captain, sir, I'm a captain. And then they form a staff, and then they start arbitrating for their people, which is what I love about Marines, working on billeting, working on chow. I went in the day after that Lieutenant Colonel arrived, and I went to supervise my postal clerk, who was headed out with mail, 29 Palms, at about 5 o'clock in the morning, because I wanted to make absolutely sure he took all the mail he should take. And I find that Lieutenant Colonel standing in my hallway saying, I'm here to arbitrate for my people. How can we do this on chow? How can we do it faster? Where are they billeted? And that's just the side of the Corps I love. You just take Marines from anywhere at any time, and you say, we need you. I'm going to choke up. And they do. And I love them.
Yeah.
Forever. Till I die. Best thing I ever did. Well, not the best. One of the top 3 decisions of my life. So it was an ever-growing expansion of integration across MOSs. When I first came in, they opened up all the MOSs, and women could be combat engineers in my class. That was undone and then reopened later as 2 combat offensive. When I did my training at basic school, they said, this is the new training package, jump in. And in fact, we did everything, offensive and defensive combat. Later on, they undid the offensive. But when we were there was always a student company commander in basic school. And so by week 4, they decided they needed a female, and they picked me. Now, I had never been in charge of much of anybody. I had never raised my voice very much and called 220 people to attention in a large auditorium. I was, kind of trained up by my dad to be pro-warrior, but I had no practice at anything like that. But they picked me. So I remember standing in the ladder well, which is the stairwell, practicing how to call a room to attention when our instructors entered. And the rumor was the men didn't know if they'd stand up or not. But if they did, they wanted me to know it wasn't for me, it was for the instructors, which is fine. I don't care. Get off. Yeah. Get on your feet. I'll take any form. And it went very well, and we did okay. But it was that kind of thing where we were constantly, expanding and practicing. When we were in the field, we were combined in our squad. So I had probably 4 women or 2 women, maybe 2, and 10 guys for our squad exercises. And so we're out in the field, we got our gear, and we're doing a small squad tactical maneuver, and I'm put in charge, and I have to give the 5-paragraph order, and I have to launch us tactically. And so I'm doing my thing, trying to remember, all the lines, give all the information, launch us tactically. And remember when I said that Corps decided to make this a big PR event? Well, so I'm coming out, we had to go into a deep ravine and up the other side. I'm not the last person out of the 12. I'm so excited. I've got my pack, I've got my rifle, I remembered what to do. I am literally, my chin is clearing the top of the ravine, and I'm almost to personal and professional victory. And a little blonde news reporter with a big long microphone shoves it in my face and says, "Are you allowed to date your fellow lieutenants?" I was so angry. I mean, like my chin had hardly cleared the edge of this thing. And I don't even recall what I said. It might not have been polite, but it was just that kind of combination thing where you're trying your hardest to be as professional as you can possibly be. The press was supposed to make much of us. The Corps wanted them to, and we were pretty good PR. It was amazing to see us out there, to see us integrated, to see us firing the weapons. And we made the front page of the Fredericksburg Star, I think it was called then. It's a slightly different name now. I actually have a copy of that newspaper clipping because it was such an event to have us integrated and to get good pictures. And in fact, my dad, I clipped the article out and I mailed it home. And I was there was a big full picture of me, which I left in the car. I'll bring it to you. On like page 6 or 7, so my dad wrote to the newspaper and said, "That is my daughter. Can I buy a photograph?" And they said, "You can have one for free." So they sent him a couple of, black and white 8x10 glossies. So it was, I would say it was very favorable considering it was kind of touchy to do what was done, to do it quickly. I think the Corps is very good at doing what they're told, even if they don't agree. I think, and this is in my day, I cannot speak to now, with the society I came from, if you were told to do something, you did it, even if you didn't agree. The amount of harassment that men would give to women was somewhat limited by societal norms of propriety. Not for everybody, but I did very well. And every so often, I guess a man would step in, though not very much. Usually I could hold my own. And it wasn't very aggressive. Everybody was so shocked we were there. But as I said, I did have girlfriends who did not fare so well. There was a much crueler, meaner, I hope you fail kind of attitude, but that never happened to me. So.
What would you say your biggest challenge was?
It's very tiring and exhausting. It's just a real grindy life. And I loved it, but it was, the days are long. The chaos is high. The Marine Corps lives light, and everything was pretty austere, and to do anything took so much effort. But I just don't, I did not feel challenged by being a woman. That my personality fits in the Corps. And that's just a coincidence. And so when they held the line, that looked exactly right to me. And I saw some real compassion. I mean, I saw very, very straight-laced battalion commanders, very, very by the book, make some phenomenal findings of compassion in what you would call extenuation and mitigation after they found a guilty or not guilty for, an NJP or something. So I saw incredible leadership and incredible ethics, honor, integrity amongst my leadership. And obviously it was not very hard to do okay under that kind of an umbrella. It was just a crazy experience to turn from a civilian into a Marine, which is not, overnight. It takes some growth and development. One story when I was a brand new second lieutenant. So I get to my unit in the fleet in August, and they want to hold a women's NCO Academy class. So my unit, which was called the 1st FSSG at the time, had a tiny NCO Academy, a captain, a couple of gunnery sergeants, and a small staff to keep training young troops to lead them, from being Lance Corporal and followers to leaders. And so they wanted to do a women's class. And so they wanted a female officer there, obviously, to be a part of it and to supervise it and to make sure that everybody treated everybody right in all respects. And so they picked me for that. So I go out there and I'm going to be in charge of this group of women, of which there were probably 20. And we're talking, I was a whopping 23. And I think their age was 20. So I had this group of Lance Corporals and very, very young junior corporals. And we were being just taken through, standard squad tactics and uniform preps and all the things you'd think. Well, they also included in their training package a time at Coronado, Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, mimicking gently some of the SEAL training that normally happened there. So they take this little group of women and me down there and they show us the obstacle course. And of course, this is 1977. I had no concept of upper body strength or upper body working out or prepping. So we look at these gigantic obstacles, and some people were natural little monkeys and could scale up, but my rule was if you can't go over it, you got to go under it. So that's what we did. And you know, I crawled under the wall, and we did all of that. We did fine. We did the rappelling wall, and once again, no core strength would show up in rappelling, but I was to go first because I was the female and the leader. So I did rappel first, and I could do a rudimentary rappel in the traditional form. But my company commander of the NCO Academy was very proud of the Australian rappel, which is when you walk off face down. And with extraordinary body and core strength, you stay rigid. And he insisted I try it. So of course I tried it, and of course I lasted 15 or 20 seconds, and I lost my, my straight out position, and I collapsed, and of course I swung and hit the wall, and they, belayed me down, and all was well. But then I had to go back up again, so I did. Well, when I read the fitness report he wrote for me, it says, this lieutenant, though she failed at the Australian rappel on her first try, got up off the ground and went back up the tower and did it again. And by male Marine standards, that was extraordinary praise. And I really got a laugh that he managed to fit in that I failed on try one, but he gave me full credit for my second try. And I do cherish that I have written record of that in my military officer file to this day. I figured anytime I went up for promotion, my record probably was well examined, because who would not read that out loud just for the fun of it? I mean, it was a classic. So, but the last part we had to do, we finished our O course, we finished our rappelling wall. We were going to go out to sea in what in those days was called, I have no idea what it's called today, inflatable boat small, IBS, standard rubber raft that a SEAL team would use. Right. So it was, this is early February maybe, and that happens to be a time when the storms in Alaska generate spectacular surf. In that part of California, because I lived there as many years, and it's stunning. Well, we didn't know it, but the Army was in town, and I believe it was Army Rangers in town for some SEAL-like waterboat training, but I can't promise they were Rangers. But I do know that the Army male soldiers did not put to sea that day. Their leadership decided the surf was too high, but we did. So my little group of 20 Lance Corporals and Corporals and me got we have to, they make you, carry them down to the beach over your heads, and you're shouting and screaming, and you put them in the water. And we went out into the surf, and then we brought ourselves back in through the waves. And there mustn't have been anybody afraid of water, because it was pretty dramatic surf and water. Because thank goodness I didn't have someone that was afraid, that was falling apart on me. We all went out, we all did our thing, we all came back in. But one thing we did do that was a little girly is that was some significant roller coaster water, and it was a total blast. And so you could hear us on the beach, I realized later, saying, "Woo!" in the very best high girly voices, because it was the finest roller coaster ride ever. But we did great. We went all the way out. We brought them back in. I remember standing on the beach with the instructors, and one of the female Marines decides to drop herself off the back of the IBS to be a rudder in the water with her entire body. And of course, the male leadership is having a heart attack. She'll be drowned. And she was fine, and she climbed back in, and they rode it all the way up to the beach. And then our male leadership, not only the school instructors that were just loaned to us, but we had 2 male staff NCOs, 2 gunnery sergeants who were very good to us, that were down with us from Camp Pendleton to do this training exercise. Well, they all go to the club that night, and they were stood many a round of drinks, because though the male Army couldn't risk the surf, the little female Marines that you trained were gutsy enough to go out there without even knowing that we just did it. They told us to. Right. We did. So I have always cherished that memory of going out to sea in the surf, especially when I think of the surfs that I used to see when I lived in Carlsbad, California. Um, and we knew not to fear, and we had a blast. And the Army had to stay home that day. Oorah!
Right.
Yeah.
How did you think that the Marine Corps and your time in the Marine Corps, how does that affected your life moving forward since you got out?
Every possible way. My work ethic, my attitude to service, that's really big. My endurance, my, I don't even realize that, how would I phrase that? I don't want to say low needs, but I just don't need to be taken care of. I'm supposed to take care of myself and every single person near me who is junior to me. Whether they're younger, less experienced, or technically junior, I take care of them. And then I take care of myself after that. One of the things I adore about the Corps, and everybody assumes it's a highly rigid military organization, but it isn't. It's a highly structured military organization in which it's expected that individual initiative will flower, will just flat out explode. Figure it out, take it, run with it. And so it's very creative, it's very fluid, you have the commander's intent, you just go for it. You do proper coordination, but the creativity of achieving the mission without silly boundaries. I mean, there's some wonderfully good and appropriate boundaries, but there's a ton of bureaucratic or habit or cultural norm stuff that's optional. And the Corps is real optional about that. And so I adored the freedom of the Corps. I was empowered to know myself and be strengthened in myself, make an assessment. That was a huge part of an officer's life. Deciding my courses of action, reviewing all my possibilities, taking in every piece of data, quickly deciding, try that, skip that, I need you now, wait. That was invaluable for my whole life. And every single day I have more fun and I think I'm more efficient because I have that freedom of sureness in myself from the Corps that I would not have gotten. I would have been much more rigid and by the book without that 12 years of complete reframing by active duty. I'm incredibly grateful.
What message would you like, what would you like your grandkids or your great-grandkids to know about your service?
I love the Corps. I believe in the Corps. It's the finest fighting force in the world. It's full of the very best commitment to ethics and the very best commitment to each other. Yes, mission comes first, but you will carry your deceased comrade to the helo right after you finish, if that's all the last thing you can do for him. It's a zest and a delight. Everybody learns how they're equipped, how they're strong, what they're gifted at. They teach themselves things they never knew they could teach themselves. And so you become so equipped to do your best and have a good time while serving all the time. Every single time you're better at, you serve the other party who's not. And I just love the zest of the competency and the confidence and the service ethic. It just enriches me always to this day. It just expanded my world in all the best kinds of ways. I'm incredibly grateful that I needed a job and that the gas company and the phone company would not take me. And the Air Force wouldn't take me, no offense, and didn't want the Army. So I really was gifted with a hard thing to do that was a perfect thing for me to do.
Nothing can replace the human touch. Nothing. Carry the load, that's what we've done. Those people that have lost somebody, they realize somebody is saying, thank you for your sacrifice.